It's good to be with you again. Uh, it's been a few Sundays ago, and Seth did a lesson from the book of Genesis, and it was about Judah and Tamar. And in his lesson, he briefly went into the blessing that Judah received from his father Jacob. And so I had already read that chapter very recently before he did that lesson. And then when he did the lesson, I said, when you read Genesis 49 and you come across those blessings that are bestowed on the sons, it's one of those chapters that when you read it, it's let's just be honest. Sometimes we read certain chapters and we're like, okay, I don't understand, but keep going. I'm just going to keep on reading. And that was kind of the mindset when I first read it. I was like, this makes no sense. Like it's kind of hard to understand. And that's because you're dealing with a different culture, different people, different way of things. Actually, everything they did is very contrary to how we do things. So even today, and so you can only imagine in the ancient world how unique their culture really was. And so the chapter of Genesis, chapter 49, if you got your Bibles with you, and I'll have the verses up here too, is attributed to the patriarch Jacob, aka Israel, the son of Isaac, the grandson of Abraham. Jacob, in this chapter, gathers his 12 sons together as he nears the end of his life and imparts his final blessings, and some would say prophecies, upon them. This chapter provides a glimpse into the future of Israel and of the tribes and their descendants, and the pivotal roles that each are going to play in God's unfolding plan. Now, Jacob's words were not nearly the musings of an old man. Jacob wasn't strange for doing this. This was something that their culture was used to. Not just the Hebrew culture, but many Eastern nations around them did something similar. Where when the patriarch of a family was about to pass, they would bestow blessings on their children. And normally, the first child got most of everything. Normal circumstances. Now, in Scripture, not everything is normal circumstances. As we see with Jacob and Esau. Jacob was the younger brother. And we see something else happen too, even in this one, where Reuben loses his shot at being the firstborn and getting all that blessing. Jacob speaks with authority. He's drawing upon the relationship that he has with God and with his children. And he's going to use a lifetime of experiences that he and his family had endured and went through to bestow these blessings. The blessings that he will bestow on his children, his sons, will shape the destiny of the nation of Israel, as foretold in the book of Genesis and echoed throughout the Scriptures moving onward. Jacob's transition of leadership from the patriarch to his sons is a unique chapter. Now understand that these blessings and these prophecies aren't necessarily dealing with the individual himself. This is also going to affect and project their descendants and how they will serve their nation in the future. The word spoken of by Jacob in this chapter serves as a bridge between the patriarchal era and the establishment of a nation, setting the stage of the events that are going to take place from this moment forward in the book. It's interesting too, because when Jacob gathers his sons together and he bestows these blessings, it lets it be very clear to us that he passed soon after. So Jacob knew his time was up. He knew his time was coming to an end. And so he wanted to get these blessings, uh, I wouldn't say over with, but he wanted to get them out there. So, and Jacob, being a father, he knew his children's strengths and their weaknesses. The first son that is mentioned is Reuben, Jacob's eldest. His name means, behold, a son. He was the first son born of Leah, Jacob's first wife. And while I did say that in normal circumstances, the eldest got the most of the estate or most of the blessing or the good stuff, however you want to say that, that's not what happens in Reuben's case. You see, Jacob says, Reuben, you're my firstborn. He says, my might, my first sign of strength. I mean, you had everything you needed to have to be great. But he said, you are as unstable as water, as turbulent as water. Aiden's version said, as a flood. You have no self-control. You have no desire to just keep hands off what is not yours. Now I put it up there because what happened was he took his father's handmaiden and slept with her. This wasn't just sinful behavior, but the act itself not only showed a lack of moral integrity, not only showed that he had no self-control, as a few of the other brothers didn't as well. Study those in a second. But by doing this, Reuben basically usurped his father's position as patriarch. It was a very disgraceful act to do. Because a handmaiden was basically like a wife in their culture. That's why he mentions there that he said, you went onto your father's bed, on my couch, you defiled it. Jacob's words to Reuben served as a warning about the consequences of sinful behavior and the importance of this character and integrity in God's plans. The Bible consistently emphasizes the significance of making right decisions and the impact of sin when we don't. And when we engage in sinful actions, sometimes those consequences don't just affect us, but our descendants, our children, our grandchildren. Reuben's story serves as a cautionary tale to us, or should, reminding us of the need to walk in obedience to God's commands. Practice self-control. Have moral integrity. Respect, honor your father and your mother. That is where Reuben slipped up. Now, just for geographical purposes, I put a map up here just to show you where each of these tribes ended up. Now, Reuben, he's over here on the eastern side of the Jordan. I don't know if I'd really want to be on the eastern side of the Jordan just because your neighbors weren't very nice. Anybody have bad, not very nice neighbors? Well, these guys had quite several thousands, tens of thousands of them. Moab, Edom, Ammon, Aram, all these guys were pagan nations that would cause Israel a great deal of trouble moving forward. And so Reuben gets that region over there. And like I said, I did this just to kind of show you where they ended up. Simeon and Levi, their story is a really interesting one. A lot of detail if you really wanted to get into it. So in this passage, he groups Simeon and Levi together. Now all these guys were brothers, but Simeon and Levi get grouped together. as, some hoodlums or something. I don't know, but they were in a little trouble here. So he puts those two together because of what they had done quite recently. And this goes back to Genesis 34. So if you got your Bibles and you want to write that down, Genesis 34 tells the story where Simeon and Levi carry out this horrific slaughter among the men of the city of Shechem. Jacob describes, and we'll go into that story in just a moment, stay with me, but Jacob describes their weapons of instruments as being weapons of cruelty, referring to their violent and their vengeful nature. Due to their actions, Jacob pronounces more of a curse on them rather than a blessing almost. Not only that, but he scatters them among Israel. And that's what happens. Simeon's group basically becomes engulfed by Judah's territory. And what happened to Levi? Do you remember? He gets scattered throughout all the cities of Israel. So he doesn't really have a territory that has borders. Simeon and Levi are brothers. Their weapons are their swords are weapons of violence. Let me not enter their council. Let me not join their assembly, for they've killed men in their anger and have hamstrung oxen as they please. Cursed be their anger so fierce and their fury so cruel. I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them in Israel. I think that the account of Simeon and Levi underscores the importance of controlling your anger. And we can all speak from experience on that, where we've not controlled our emotions and let our emotions run wild. And when we let anger run wild, we often will do or say things that we'll later regret because they were wrong to say or do. That's what happens to Simeon and Levi. Doesn't seem like they regretted their actions, though. So many times when we lose our cool, the thing that we want to do is an act of vengeance versus an act of patience or something of that nature. Their story serves as a reminder that rash decisions made in anger can have long-lasting consequences, can damage relationships. Jacob's words to Simeon and Levi highlight the principle of that famous, what you sow is what you reap. Jacob's words to his sons, Simeon and Levi, highlight the importance of character, integrity, and emotional control when fulfilling God's purposes. The stories of Reuben, Simeon, and Levi serve as timeless lessons for us, emphasizing the consequences of sin, the need for repentance, and the power of God's redemptive work in the transformation of our spiritual lives. So what was the big deal? What did they do? If you go back to Genesis 34, their sister, Dinah, their only sister, and she happened to be their full-blooded only sister, so that probably made the relationship a little bit closer. She was the daughter of Leah. These were the sons of Leah. Okay, we're still on those guys. But she was taken and violated by the prince of Shechem. Now, in their culture, what's interesting about that is when that act would happen, if there was no other person chosen for her to become wed with, she got stuck with that person. So this wasn't just an act of, sexual immorality against their sister, but the taking away of their sister to another people's. That was a big deal. And what's wild about all this story, if you read it in full context, the prince of Shechem pretty much tells his dad, the king, I want this woman. And so the dad goes to Jacob. He's like, hey, my son, he likes your daughter. I don't know how that conversation would even have played out. But basically, hey, he likes her. You know, they want to be together. Even though Dinah doesn't have any word in this, as far as we know, we don't see any recording of her words. And so Simeon and Levi get together and they're like, you know what? That's a good idea. Our people become your people become our people. Okay. If you want to do that, though, we have a rule. You got to be more like us. You got to meet us halfway. And their compromise was circumcision. Now, I don't know about you, but that's a hard compromise to say yes to. But guess what? The king and the prince agreed to it. So he must have been pretty struck by Dinah to accept that. Because for a grown man to undergo that procedure was not pleasant. Unless you're an infant. No. And so Simeon and Levi, they're like, this is and we don't know their plan until the end, until they carried it out. All they've done is they verbally persuaded the king, his son, and all the leading prominent men of Shechem to do it. Chances are the king of Shechem gave the order, and if you didn't follow, you probably got executed. Just throwing that out there. So they all did it. They all did it. Now imagine how you would feel, gentlemen, 3 days later. Anyone that's had some type of surgery know how you feel at day 3. Rough. So imagine no sterilization, no medication really, besides maybe certain plant life or whatever. You wouldn't be fighting any battles. You're not going to be doing any farming. You're not going to be building any buildings. You're going to be doing nothing. And on day 3, Simeon and Levi bust into the city of Shechem and slaughter all the men. And some people look at that story and they go, how could they do that? Well, it's very possible when you can't pick up a sword and defend yourself. But what was the big deal with what they did? When I read that story, I'm like, why didn't they just, not saying I condone them taking out the prince of Shechem who committed the act, they took them all out. Their act of vengeance was it was definitely not in a box controlled. It was wild and let loose. And by deceiving all these men into undergoing this procedure and then slaughtering them, really shows you how much they thought this plan out. Simeon's name means to listen. I think it's interesting, Levi's name is attached. These two seem attached, and I wonder if Levi just did whatever Simeon told him to do or vice versa. But they got called together in this. And Jacob goes on to say, I'm not going to come into their council. I don't want to join their assembly. So Jacob obviously has stood apart from these two and said, I had nothing to do with that. I want nothing to do with what they did in Shechem. He didn't approve of it. Obviously, he probably didn't approve of the violation of his daughter, but he didn't approve either of their act of vengeance being so great. Jacob's words carry a sense of mourning almost over the lost potential of these 3 boys, men, Reuben, Simeon, and Levi. Because until we get to Judah, we don't have a full-blown positive blessing. These 3 get in trouble. And until we get to Judah, he's the first one that gets full praise. And what can we learn from that story? I think there's a lot of stuff we can learn from that story. Control your anger. Their passion could have been used for something so good if they channeled it properly, but they didn't. Their story tells us about the dangers that we can experience with unchecked anger and aggression. We should seek justice, but through peaceful means. Proverbs 15:18 kind of echoes this. It says, a hot-tempered person stirs up conflict, but the one who is patient calms a quarrel. Judah. So here you go. So there's Simeon. His descendants sort of get engulfed by Judah's, and then Levi is scattered. I think it's like 48 cities, 48 towns that he's scattered to in Joshua. So, Judah. Judah's name means praise. The first one to get a full positive blessing. Judah, your brothers will praise you. Your hand will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down to you. You are a lion's cub, Judah. You return from the prey, my son. Like a lion, he crouches and lies down. Like a lioness, who dares to rouse him? The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he to whom it belongs shall come. Your translation may say Shiloh. It's the same person, Jesus. And the obedience of the nation shall be his. He will tether his donkey to a vine, his colt to the choicest branch. Do you remember what Jesus rode into Jerusalem? Yep. He will wash his garments in wine, his robe in the blood of grapes. His eyes will be darker than wine, and his teeth whiter than milk. So in verse 8, Jacob starts by addressing Judah as a symbol of strength and leadership among his brothers. The first one to show some potential, regardless of the other three. He refers to Judah as a lion's cub, signifying in the Eastern world power, courage, and royal authority. The Hebrews were not the only ones that saw a lion as an animal of this characteristic. Many Eastern nations also did. In Revelation 5:5, which we studied before, the scripture refers to Jesus as being the lion of the tribe of Judah, emphasizing his royalty and powerful nature. The imagery of the lion will set the tone for Judah's future in the history of Israel. Now, when the people wanted a king, who did they first choose? Saul. Saul was not of the tribe of Judah. He was from the tribe of Benjamin. After Saul dies, David becomes king, the first king from the lineage of Judah. And from that moment forward, Judah will provide the majority of the kings to serve, not the other tribes. Judah would endure many military victories. Jacob promises about that future in verses 10 and 11, mentioning the scepter and the ruler's staff. Again, that's foreshadowing the future of Judah's leadership over his people. The prophecy will find ultimate fulfillment in King David. But of course, Jesus Christ will also come from this line. And his kingdom knows no geographical boundaries or cultural boundaries, and eventually fulfills the universal authority highlighted in the reference to the obedience of all nations. Now, in verse 12, it says, it's an interesting choice of words. It says, his eyes will be darker than wine, his teeth whiter than milk. So when I read that the first time, I was like, that sounds odd. But the reason why is because, again, we've got to go back to their way of writing and authorship. This was not unfamiliar to write this way. Actually, if you go to Song of Solomon, chapter 4, verse 2, Solomon will describe his lover as having teeth whiter than sheep's wool. Now, I don't really know if he's just complimenting her because she had pretty teeth, but it was more or less a form of Hebrew poetry. And it indicated purity, holiness, beauty, cleanliness. That's what that represented. Now, even though Judah was not a man that could boast about being very holy, as the story of that Seth brought up some Sundays back, his blessing symbolized that someone of complete holiness, someone of complete purity, is going to come forth. And he would indeed be the Holy of Holies. Zebulun. 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 Zebulun means dwelling. And poor Zebulun, some of these guys only got one sentence. And it was like, that's all I got for you. See you later. And you can imagine he was after Judah. He's probably like, what? Judah got a whole essay. Zebulun will live by the seashore and become a haven for ships. His border will extend to Sidon. Now, this is interesting because if you look at the map, his border doesn't necessarily fit the detail here. Actually, just to skip ahead real quick, he's smack in the middle of Asher and Issachar and Naphtali. So when did he reach a seashore? Well, talk about that. So as I was going through each of these sons, when I got to Zebulun, I had trouble because that's where it got me tripped up. Don't let it trip you up, though. It's okay. It's interesting because the translation there, live by the seashore, from what I was studying, can also mean look towards the seashore. Well, to me, that gives a whole other meaning. It kind of fits where they were, but it also says that his territory extended up to Sidon. And if you look at the map, Sidon is way up there above Asher's territory. The Kishon River did flow through Zebulun's territory. The Kishon River was the same river where Sisera got his chariot stuck, and he had to flee. And the reason why is because the Kishon River is not a deep river all the way throughout. Actually, when you get into Zebulun's territory, which is where it was believed that Sisera got stuck, it's all marshland. It's just swampy marsh. So it makes sense why he got stuck. His chariots couldn't go any further. He must not have done a very good battlefield overlook before sending his chariots of iron into battle. That would have been a lot of weight. So we could say the Kishon River makes up for that, being a haven for ships, but that's unlikely too. It is interesting, though, that a lot of Jewish commentators would agree that at some point in history, Zebulun did have territory that extended up the coast. Actually, Josephus would mention that the area of Zebulun in the time of Jesus actually was like this. And also it seems to indicate, too, that his territory kind of bordered the Sea of Galilee, too, according to Matthew 4. And we'll talk about that when we get to the Naphtali. That's it, yeah. Now, obviously, what does this tell us? this passage of Zebulun. I know it's short and sweet, but this passage about Zebulun being a haven for ships and sort of being like a lighthouse. He's going to be a place of refuge. He's going to carry good characteristics about himself, about his descendants. And you got to keep in mind, too, that this serves as a reminder of God's sovereignty in orchestrating these destinies of nations and individuals. He's going to fulfill His plans throughout their generations. Again, the New Testament speaks of Jesus as the ultimate fulfillment of all these prophecies, including those that were given to these tribes, like we talked about with Judah. The reference to the land of Zebulun and Naphtali being honored by the coming of Jesus may be referenced in Matthew 4. I'd write that down. Then we get to Issachar. And that Issachar is where we're going to finish up this morning. And the next time I'm with you, we're actually going to continue our study with the others. So Issachar means there is a reward. There is a reward. Issachar is a raw-boned donkey. It means strong. Doesn't mean he was starving. That's what I thought it meant at first. Lying down among the sheep pens, when he sees how good his resting place is and how pleasant is his land, he will bend his shoulder to the burden and submit to forced labor. All right, let's talk about that for a second. Donkeys are interesting animals. Some of you may own a donkey or donkeys. Donkeys in this part of the world, we use them a lot for protection of our herds and flocks. Right? You don't ever want to get in a field with a donkey that's trying to protect his brothers and sisters' sheep and cows and whatnot. You will get ran over. They will not hesitate. But donkeys not only were protective animals, but they were also very laborious and still are today. And in this part of the world, at this specific moment in time, even during the times of Jesus, donkeys served a purpose, and that was hard work and service. It's what they did. This passage shows us a little bit of a glimpse into the character of Issachar, one of Jacob's sons. And I think the imagery here is pretty powerful and metaphorical. The portrayal here suggests a certain simplicity and contentment with maybe a life of humility. We could say that. But donkeys being used for laborious tasks, and the description of Issachar as a strong donkey gives us this context that may suggest to us that his descendants were going to be ready when hard work would come their way. If service were required, they were going to answer to the call of service. The mention of sheep pens could symbolize his place within the family, within the tribes, surrounded by all those around him who depended on him for support, hard work, and maybe even protection. And I know for some of this, we're kind of reaching outside the boundaries of the text. I get that. But all we're doing is studying the text. And we're looking at what else could be communicated here through this blessing. Actually, the territory that he would end up with, if I'm not mistaken, had the Valley of Jezreel. The Valley of Jezreel was a very fertile land. Now, it wasn't that they had the best of the best. There were other nations that got pretty good territory allotments. But just having the Valley of Jezreel was a big deal. Very, very fertile land there. The verse goes on to mention Issachar's response to his surroundings, that when he acknowledges the goodness of his resting place and the pleasantness of it, he's going to willingly shoulder the burden and submit to forced labor, perhaps to keep it. This could be interpreted as a way of saying that Issachar's descendants are going to see the need to work diligently to fulfill their responsibilities to keep what they've got, even if it does require sacrifice or hard effort. It speaks to the importance of accepting one's responsibilities even when those responsibilities are challenging to accomplish or to get done. I did want to share this real quick and then we'll be done. When considering the story of Issachar throughout the Bible, there's limited information about him as an individual. We know more about his descendants, and a lot of these guys, they're descendants more than their actual selves, unless we talk about the three top ones. Even Judah was famous for some other things. However, the tribe of Issachar would play a significant role in the history of Israel, because Issachar is mentioned alongside with the tribe of Zebulun in later biblical accounts, even in the New Testament, because they share the territory, they bordered each other that were assigned to them in the book of Joshua. And the men of Issachar understood the times and knew what Israel should do in times of trouble, such as in 1 Corinthians, 1 Chronicles chapter 12. 1 Chronicles chapter 12, verse 32, suggested that the tribe of Issachar was known for having a reputation for wisdom and discernment. And that trait aligns with Genesis 49. As someone who would perhaps initially seek great wisdom, well, actually, they may initially seek comfort and a humble life, but ultimately possess the wisdom to recognize the need for hard work and service when it's needed. I think that the verses describing Issachar are nothing bad. The language of being a slave kind of throws it off. It doesn't sound too good, but depends on how it's translated. But the verse concerning Issachar here offers valuable insights into the nature of duty, of hard work and obedience. What we're called, aren't we called for the same mission? To serve? To assist? Even when that work is hard? The story of Issachar serves as a great reminder to all of us that we all have a vital role to play in God's plans. It's our attitude towards our responsibilities and our duties that make a difference. It's our attitudes that we personally have about those responsibilities that are going to shape our legacy and our impact that we have around other people, on other people. Now, the next time I'm with you, we are going to, we'll continue on with Dan, and work our way all the way to Benjamin. A lot of information there. I would hope we could get through it, but no promises. But so that way you can prepare. So read Genesis 49, read all of it, but definitely start in verse 16 for next time, and then we'll go into that. We'll go into that lesson together. So today you are here. We are here. If you have a need, whatever that need is, you've probably been thinking. It could be something you've been thinking about for quite some time, or it's something spur of the moment. That's okay either way. We're here with you. We're here for you. As brothers and sisters in Jesus, if it's your desire to let Jesus take control of your life today, I would highly encourage you to do that. However, if you are here today and you need a reconnection to God, you need prayers, you need encouragement, again, we're here for you. We're here for God, but we're here for each other. So whatever your need is, why not let it be known today as together we stand and as we sing. Jesus loves me, this